The landscape has literally changed here in our nation's capital. A new president, a new Congress, new leadership at DoD. This will be a big focus of our upcoming shows, giving you an in-person look at the people, the ideas, the policy directions of this new political landscape.
Well, so much has happened. The transition is still at its early stages in many ways. So, to catch up on the news from D.C., I'm happy to welcome our first guest, Deputy Editor and Senior Pentagon Correspondent for Defense News, Aaron Mehta. Aaron covers policy, strategy, and acquisition at the highest levels of DoD and across the world, and also in defense industry.
Welcome, Aaron. It's a pleasure to have you with us. You know, I want to talk a little bit about pace of appointments. As we near the 2-month mark since the inauguration of President Biden as our newest president, only 3 of nearly 61 political appointees at DoD have advanced. While this is not uncommon to have slow advancement of nominations, it does feel even slower than normal. How does this compare in your view, and what should we expect from this process, and what's the impact of this slow-moving transition?
Well, thanks for having me, guys, and congratulations on the show. Yeah, so this is, it's slow. It's slower than ideal, I think is safe to say. Scholars who have studied the numbers say that the Biden administration actually has done a pretty good job of getting nominees across government forward to the Senate to begin the nomination process. But DoD is lagged behind. As I said, we have 3 nominees. We have now Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, who was announced in middle of December and confirmed the day after the inauguration. We have Kathleen Hicks, who's the now Deputy Secretary of Defense, who was announced at the end of December and confirmed in early February. And we have Colin Kahl, who is the nominee to be Undersecretary of Policy. He was announced the same day as Hicks. He had his confirmation hearing recently, and I think we'll talk a little bit about him going forward. Not necessarily sure how quickly he's going to get into office. Otherwise, you know, it's been essentially 2+ months now since those nominees were named, and we don't have other people. We don't have names for the service secretaries. We don't have names for the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence or Personnel and Readiness, let alone the kind of lower level people who probably most people have never heard of, the Assistant Secretary of Defenses for, you know, say Asian policy and such, but people who really make sure that the things are moving in the Pentagon and make big policy decisions. You know, the Biden team has told reporters that they focused on getting people into the building who didn't need Senate confirmation right away. They've done a pretty good job. They have almost 100 people who are now political appointees who are not Senate confirmed. They're lower level to get in the building and have them working. And that's everything from Lloyd Austin's chief of staff to experts in various different policy areas such as nuclear, chemical, biological issues. But you do want these Senate confirmed people in place because when it comes to talking inside the rest of the government, working with state or other areas, you want to have equal representation for the Defense Department. And it's hard to do that when you have people kind of filling these roles in an acting capacity.
Aaron, thanks for that great overview. Obviously, you're in a wonderful position to be able to see what's happening. Let me drill down just a little bit on one of those people who actually have advanced, and that's Colin Kahl, the Biden administration's nominee to be the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. I know he had a pretty tough hearing last week in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee. The SASC really did kind of focus down on questions about partisanship and past tweets. But past that, what do you think ultimately will happen? Will he be confirmed? You know, what's that process going to look like?
Yeah, it's interesting we're talking now because just a couple of hours ago, Jim Inhofe, who's the ranking member, top Republican on the committee, announced he would not be supporting Kahl, which is a sign that probably no Republicans will support him, which means it's going to come down to a party line vote. Look, Kahl is somebody who he has 2 strikes against him for Republicans. The first is that he was involved pretty heavily in crafting the Iran nuclear deal during the Obama administration and has continued to defend that deal pretty vociferously in public. And the second is that he has tweeted many things over the last couple of years that are partisan. Things, you know, insulting President Trump or saying Republicans believe one thing and we should believe something else. You know, the reality is the partisan thing, look, the tweets are not great. He's apologized for them. We know that Biden's pick to be the budget director, Neera Tanden, essentially was torpedoed by her tweets. But there have been partisan people who've been confirmed before. Certainly during the Trump administration, there were people we saw who were confirmed fairly easily who had pretty partisan tweets in their half. The Iran deal, I think, is frankly the bigger issue for a lot of people. It remains to be a flashpoint, particularly in the defense communities, about whether that was a good deal or not, and whether people who were involved in it should be given top jobs. The Undersecretary of Defense for Policy is the de facto number 3 person in the department in terms of civilians. They're everything from, they do some budgetary stuff, they do some acquisition stuff, they do a lot of foreign relations. It's very much a key role, and they're seeing a lot of resistance from people who are saying, look, if he thinks this deal was a good deal, then maybe his judgment's impaired. The politics here are real interesting. Joe Manchin, who is the Democrat from West Virginia, has really set himself up in the first couple of months of the Biden administration as the key vote. It's a 50-50 Senate. They need Democrats to stay locked in to get essentially anything passed, and Manchin seems to be aware of that. He said in an interview this week that he is talking with Colin Kahl. He's also heard from Secretary Lloyd Austin. He's going to talk to Bob Gates, who Kahl worked for, and has said he hasn't made up his mind. But with Inhofe saying he's not going to vote for him, it seems likely that Manchin is going to be the deciding vote in the Senate Armed Services Committee to move it forward. If Manchin says, okay, I'll back him, it'll go to the full Senate, and likely it'll end up being a purely partisan vote that'll get him in. If Manchin breaks, then it seems hard to see how he ends up working in the Pentagon going forward.
You know, this is why I keep my Twitter usage for sports only. I
Smart,
only follow
very
the
smart.
Dallas Cowboys, I tell you what. Well, you know what, there was some good news in terms of nominations this week. 2 women whose nominations for combatant commands that were previously held up did advance. Can you tell us more about this?
Yeah, so that's Air Force General Jacqueline Van Overst is going to be the head of, or has been nominated to be the head of U.S. Transportation Command. And Lieutenant General Laura Richardson will get a 4th star and take over at U.S. Southern Command if she's confirmed. This is the 2nd and 3rd women to be nominated ever to run a combatant command. The first one was in 2016 when Air Force General Lori Robinson took over NORTHCOM. Before that, it was all men. And this is seen as a big thing going forward for diversity. These were people, however, who were actually selected for these jobs during the Trump administration. Then Secretary Mark Esper, before he was fired following the election, and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs Mark Milley had these recommendations ready to go. And in Esper's own words, they decided not to push them forward because they felt that the Trump administration, the people who were in the White House at the time, would not back women for these top roles. They wanted, in Esper's mind, they wanted to see men who were kind of fit the mold, and they might have shot down these nominations. And so Esper told the New York Times in February, a really stunning revelation, that he said this, that they made the decision, him and Milley, to hold off sending these nominations up until they saw what happened after the election. And we saw that they held them essentially until after Trump left office and Biden came in. Esper said these 2 women are incredibly qualified. I think talking to folks who have dealt with them and looking at the resumes, they're absolutely qualified for these jobs. But the fact that Esper felt the need to hold off on sending these up is quite a stunning revelation. Going forward, I would expect them to be confirmed pretty easily. It's just a matter of timing. These COCOM jobs are largely up based on time, so I think this summer we'll probably see them both step into office, and I think there will be a lot of people, women, but also people who just support spreading out the Pentagon and diversifying a little bit, who are going to be quite happy about that.
Well, Aaron, I think we're about out of time here, so I really appreciate you coming on today. We'd love to have you back, and hopefully we'll see you soon here in the future.
Great, appreciate it, guys. Thanks a lot.